All right, welcome back to the Spartacus Project, everybody. We're going to start this episode off with a recap of East versus West 14. And in my opinion, this was the best pay per view card Ingens put together. And part of that was because he had such a live crowd there. I don't know what the attendance was versus the other matches and events that he's hosted, but when John Brzenk came out and pulled Leonidas, you could like feel the crowd and you could hear them cheering for him. And in between rounds, you could hear him cheering for him. And when he won and was giving his speech after, you could really feel that crowd. And I think that's something Ingen needs more going forward, whether it's in Turkey or North America or wherever he does it. He needs to have more of a crowd like that where they can really you can feel that. It's like the UFC does the same thing where they do events at the Apex and during COVID when no one's there, and that's cool because you can hear the punches land. But you really need to hear the crowd to feel the emotion because you feel the same way at home when you're watching an event and you're cheering. You resonate more with the crowd than you do with no noise going, only hearing the announcers talking. And to start it off, I think we should talk about Brzenk versus Leonidas. That
Mhm.
was one of my favorite matches I've ever watched because you're seeing an older legend puller go against a guy who looks like a Greek god. Leonidas weighed 275 with minimal body fat. His arms look like Saplankov in his prime. His tricep bulges like a bicep. He was clearly stronger than John too if you watch that match, but you just see John fighting in every angle. There's times where he sinks the hook and Leonidas looks at him and says no, and then he has to run and sit on his pronator, and he's just hanging on for life, and then switches to a fly. It was a beautiful match. If you haven't seen it, go watch John Brzenk versus Leonidas Arconas. Beautiful match by John. He did everything he had to do to win, fought tooth and nail. And what do you think about that, Chris?
Yeah, I saw that match. Well, John had everything Leonidas didn't have, and vice versa, right? He connected better, he adjusted better, and he was obviously the weaker guy. But Leonidas wasn't like his brute force is off the charts, but struggled to connect, struggled to adapt. John just out arm wrestled him, and that's what you want to see. When I think when Engen put this card together, and more specifically this match, he's thinking of tight wars, right? Like matches that can go either way and all that stuff. And I think that's what happened. And you had the much stronger, younger, rawer athlete versus, I mean, the goat who has an arsenal of tools in his toolbox, and he used them all. And what an amazing match to see. And I think everyone ultimately wanted to see that outcome, short of like Leonidas's fans and family and stuff like that. But what a great outcome! What a great match!
Yeah, I agree too, and I think that's part of what makes John the greatest of all time. If you watch that entire event from start to finish, that the crowd when John was pulling and warring and winning was 20 to 50 times louder than at any point in that night. And contrast that to when Devin's pulling Chance Shaw, the people that are like yelling and cheering, I think a lot of them are cheering for Chance because Devin's such a fucking clown and acting like such a fool that they want him to lose. And it was weird for me to have a moment watching something where I'm like, Devin is great, but he will never be John because of things like this. Like the way Devin pulls, he makes you want him to lose. And the match he had with Chance was the most embarrassing match I've ever seen as far as the antics. Like if I'm Chance's dad, I'm furious. I'm like the way he was talking to him and treating him and going over to his corner and saying all this crazy shit to him. I would have been I I would have been laughing if I'm not associated with it because I think it's funny to watch. But if Devin was my dad or my brother or my father, I'm ashamed to see him act that way in a match where he's the clear favorite. And even in a match where you're not the clear favorite, what are you doing, man? You look like a complete clown to me.
Yeah, he's trying to play the role of the heel, except this isn't WWE, and this isn't acting, right? This isn't stage. This is actual authentic competition, and that's the difference between John. John's always honorable, always respectful, um, and he doesn't clown, he doesn't sandbag, he doesn't fuck around, he doesn't disrespect. And yeah, I completely agree. And one thing I noticed about John, he retired like 10 years ago and then came back, or 7, 8 years ago and then he came back. And when John was in his, well, I say prime, but he was in his prime for 20 years, 25 years, he was always confident, always stoic. And sometimes against like uh, heavy rivals, you'd see a level of excitement. But in the last 3 years, sometimes John, you can see that he doesn't feel he's a favorite and he's not that confident. But he goes into the match with all his experience and his bag of tools and all that stuff. And when he wins now, you can see that it's almost he's taking more joy in winning now at his age than he did 20 years ago, or it seems like it anyway, because he's no longer the alpha male, or he's not the alpha predator. He's not the everyone respects the shit out of him, but he's no longer the most feared man under 220, over 220. Like he's no longer that guy, and yet he still has all that experience and all that knowledge and all that technical acumen. And I enjoy watching John win more now than I ever did because he's coming from a position of an underdog more times than not, even though we don't look at it that way because he's the GOAT. He's coming out of a position of like Voda, he was the underdog. He was a huge underdog versus Voda, and look what he did. And look at his expression when he wins. Like it's almost like he's surprising himself. So it's an amazing thing to see a man at his age come back and win like he's doing versus much younger, stronger athletes. And I'm not a huge John fan. I was always a bigger Ron Bass fan than John Buzing fan. But watching a man in his twilight, like I watched the PGA Tour last summer where Tiger Woods came back, and he was, not even close to what he once was, and he was sad watching him try to compete and his body giving out, and he didn't even make the cut. That's not John. John is still capable of doing amazing things on any given day, and he surprises himself. Anyway, it's watching John win. It's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, and I appreciate it more now too because he's not as dominant. So when he goes in, you're rooting for him, even though you may think he's the underdog. And before this, we had talked about this match. I thought John was going to kind of toy with him, and I called Leonidas. I'm like, oh, he's a strong guy. He's not really an arm wrestler. Leonidas is really an arm wrestler, and whether you want to call it on strength or technical ability, he really can arm wrestle. Once his technical ability reaches his strength, he's going to be a force. He's really an arm wrestler. And then I just wanted to state that before I move past this.
No, he is. He is an arm wrestler, and no doubt is he not a professional arm wrestler, but not at the level of John, technical wise, obviously. Is he? I mean, he's got elite strength. He doesn't have elite technique, but it's slowly getting up there. But he still does not like. It takes like sometimes more than 10, 15 years of arm wrestling where you can make those automatic micro adjustments without even thinking about it in the heat of the moment. He still can't do that. But that being said, he didn't lose the match because he wasn't technically sound. He's technically sound. John just had a response to everything.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with what you're saying. It was the micro adjustments that made the biggest difference. It was his ability to capitalize when he had the micro adjustments over John is why he lost, because John could sink into a spot and hang out, or sink into a spot and hang out, and he didn't realize 100% how to capitalize that. Then once he gets that, his strength is clearly way up there. And if you look at him, that doesn't surprise you. But I wanted to move on from that match too. You talked about Ron Bath. I know you love Todd Hutchings. Todd Hutchings versus Prudnik in the rematch where he had previously lost to Prudnik. What a fucking show that was. And I think we both predicted Todd Hutchings to beat Prudnik, but he really beat Prudnik. It wasn't really close. Kind of flatlined him, multiple angles. Oh, he top rolled him. Todd Hutchings top rolled Prudnik at one point and then finished him inside. He looked completely in control of the table. How much of that do you think is Todd Hutchings leveling up and Prudnik leveling down? Because we're seeing Prudnik take a lot of L's right now.
It's hard to say. Prudnik has a lot of things going on. I don't think he's fully committed. Well, he's fully committed, but it's not. I don't know if it's like he's obsessed with arm wrestling right now, but Todd is not the smartest arm wrestler in the world. He might not even be in the top 10 when I say smart in terms of arm wrestling IQ. He's very, very, very good, but I wouldn't put him in the top 5 or 10. However, he is the best in the world at using his brain to scientifically apply training and make it work 100%. No one else can do it as well as him. And that's why he's, at his age, pound for pound, maybe the strongest arm wrestler in the world. In his position, pound for pound, I don't think anyone's stronger.
Yeah.
And that's incredible. I don't care if PEDs or not, just because of his age and the injuries and stuff. What he does, everyone tries to do something in the gym so the output on the table is X. Okay, everyone, Devin, you, me, amateurs, they all have, this is what my training, and this is what I want my training to lead to. I want it to look like X. I want it to lead to these results. No one does it better. And Todd's had an up and down career. He's been in, he's been out. But when he's fully committed and there's a prize or a goal, no one gets to that applied training to get that result better than he does. And that result is fucking horsepower.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's absurd, and I think you hit the nail on the head. He has found the perfect training to combine, like it's like a symbiote. His training fits perfectly for him, because in arm wrestling, there's a million different ways to do it. There's top rolling training, there's pressing training, there's hooking training. He said, "This is my angle, and I'm going to train all these things specifically to make it stronger and more perfect." And the proof is in the pudding. He's been beating everybody, and shout out to Paul Lynn. Let's skip over the Paul Lynn Rustam match. We'll just synapse it. Paul Lynn had a good match with Rustam. He lost 3-0, but he was kind of in there. It was nice little hook wars. He got Rustam close to the pin pad a couple times, lost all 3 rounds. Those 2 matches, I think, set up what we predicted earlier, Rustam versus Hutchings for the rematch. And at this point, I'm saying Hutchings got smoked by Rustam previously. I think Hutchings will flatline him if they set that matchup. And it would be the greatest thing for Hutchings ever, because that was the most dominated he's ever been in a match. And for him to come back 10 years later and flatline that guy would be fucking amazing.
I think way too many people study and analyze and set their training based on what Devin does and what many other arm wrestlers do, but not enough people really pay attention to what Todd's doing. And Todd's not, he's not cryptic about his training. It's out there. And I trained with a guy 2 years ago who specifically was using the Todd side pressure thing template, and he wasn't getting the results. And he would show me what he was doing, and he said, scientifically, Todd has the best application for what he needs to do. There's another aspect of Todd, and that's pain threshold. He can gut out pain better than maybe anyone. And they'll say, well, what about Michael Todd? It's one thing when your arm's straight under the table, you're not gutting anything out. But so what Todd's doing, he's an engineer, so he has that background, and he's engineered a perfect plan for the way he wants to arm wrestle. But he also applies it with an incredible amount of, intestinal fortitude that almost all pullers cannot put themselves through. So that's like the perfect storm of intelligence in terms of application and being able to put your body through that template at a high level with a high load. And not enough people study the man and also the application. Like you have to study the two. It's not just, oh, I'm going to use this application, I want to become him. There's a lot of things you got to look at, and you can't teach mental toughness. You can't teach it.
Yeah, and I wish I had that. That's hampered me the recent years, where I'm kind of half in arm wrestling, half out. Like I'm helping my son wrestling, helping my wife arm wrestling. If it wasn't for my wife being involved in arm wrestling, I probably wouldn't go to a lot of events because I'm in so much pain. Like when I go to events, I'm in so much fucking pain, and I hate taking losses to people when, man, if I was healthy, but I don't want to blow my fucking arm out.
But that's chronic pain. That's chronic inflammation and pain, and you have to be foolish. Well, not foolish, but it's working through that is not smart. It's not going to get you. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, let's say you're fresh, you're healthy, everything's healthy, there's no pain, and you're doing a hook match with someone who's 5% stronger than you in the hook. How much, if 10 out of 10 is max effort, and I don't mean max effort, I mean like you literally physiologically cannot give anymore. And then you stay there, and then you back it off and you go back and you stay there again. I'm talking about that level of pain, not dealing through injury.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Because anyone, I mean, you're never advancing if you're working through injury and rehab is one thing, but if you have chronic inflammation in your elbow, or you have acute inflammation, and you decide you're going to arm wrestle as hard as you can for 50 straight days, you're going to move backwards. You're not moving forward, you're moving backwards fast. Uh, so I don't mean working through pain in that respect. I mean, when you're feeling relatively healthy, and Todd's never 100% healthy, but when he's able to move his max load, he's doing it, I think, and you can see it when he pulls on the table. It's hard to have him give up a match. Like you're never going to have him release a match because, oh, it's getting tough. Um, you know, so I just think he can deal with a lot of healthy pain, not unhealthy pain.
No, I agree with that too, and that it makes more sense when you lay it out that way because that's probably how I got to the point where I am because I'm a complete retard. I'll go to practice, or when I was healthy, I'd stay on the table for an hour and a half, just like, and when I'm lifting nonstop. But you kind of need that mentality to progress. I see so many guys in the gym over the past 20 years who are pathetic looking people that I see in there regularly, and they're like, "Oh, I just have bad genetics," or "Oh, I can't eat enough." And I'm like, "No, man, I see you. You don't lift hard enough. You're not willing to push yourself to a point where it actually hurts, or to a point where you're fatigued or falling apart. You have to be willing to break yourself down to build yourself up." And Todd Hutchins is clearly willing to do that, and he's smart enough to know how to. A lot of guys don't recognize, and Todd Hutchins has talked about this in the past, where I'm not trying to top roll. I'm not trying to do anything else but my move, and he's sharpening the edge of his blade to the point where it will pierce any shield, and it's worked for him thus far. It's a great mentality if you're his age and you're at his point in the sport. Like, he's peaked everything perfect for who he is, what his age is. He knows what he is, and I wouldn't advise that for everybody. Like, I think if you're young and you're starting off, you should learn everything a little bit, and then as you start to siphon off the things that don't work for you, then start sharpening your edge. But Todd Hutchins is a prime example of what a sharp fucking spear looks like in arm wrestling because he goes through everything. And what do you think if him and Rustam have a match? Who do you think comes out on top of that?
Todd.
Todd?
Yeah.
Me too. Yeah. I don't think
He's,
Rustam can. I don't think Rustam can. If Rustam's not going to top roll him, and even if he does, Todd's going to go sideways right through him. I think that's a fucking perfect match to make.
I don't think you can bet against Todd right now against anyone that's under 230-ish.
Yeah.
Monsters will beat him. But, you could take the strongest, or maybe, even, I would even say Levon. If you say to Levon you can't roll Todd, you kind of have to go sideways on him. Let him get tucked. Let him keep his flexion, reverse flexion, and go through him. He won't. He won't. He'll have to pronate, and he'll probably pronate easily. And like, you're just not, you just can't beat him in his move. Now, who's the strongest right-handed hooker on earth? But that guy, who would be the strongest right-handed hook puller, unlimited weight? Who would that guy be? Wouldn't be Dennis?
It might be Gennady.
Yeah, okay, that's a good example because they both. He's like he pulls a little bit like Todd. He would probably go through Todd, but he'd have to pump a few times. Like, it wouldn't be smooth. And he's got 100 pounds on Todd, maybe 80 pounds. I remember. What's that?
I said maybe more than 100. That's a big motherfucker.
Yeah. But I'm saying, but Gennady's a grinder. He's super strong, but that match against Devin, like, Devin was acting so fucking cocky after the first match, and you just got out grinded for the first time that I can ever remember. He got out willed.
Probably the only time ever in his career a guy out grinded him, which was shocking.
Yeah. And I remember, anyway, going back to my original point, I used to have practices in 2013, 14, and 15, 16 guys, and I just watched them, we'd pull, and then at the end of the practice, I said A+. Then I go to the next guy, B-. And I said, you got an F, you got a D. And one guy said, how can I get like a C-? I fucking beat everyone here. I said, it's based on how hard you worked to get stronger or better. And you didn't work that hard. Well, I beat everyone. I don't give a shit. I like to see people working incredibly hard. More specifically, I like to see people work more hard and smart. I used to take the biggest guy at practice, and I'd say, okay, you could probably beat me, but let me drive into your arm. I'm short arm. Let me drive into it with my cup and then give me 10 seconds and you open, you slowly pin me. Don't, not fast. And what happens usually, unless they're tremendously strong, they'd move me to my lock and I'd hold them. But I would be redlining and I would try to redline for 5, 6 seconds. And they were working very hard to pin me. And a lot of times I would start to see stars and I would get flushed and then they pin me and then I go left on them. And we go right, left, and I would get extra guys. And my goal was to get the stars for an hour, left and right, left and right. But I mean, uh, you know, as much pain as I can take. And I mean, face is red. I'm literally screaming. Hopped up on 7 Red Bull, Oxy, the whole shebang. Yeah, everything so that my body, um, you know, I can get through that threshold because I believe that's when the body builds layers, is when you can deal with ridiculously heavy amount of intense resistance and like central nervous system, right? Like everything's firing. My quads, my calves would be sore the next day. My traps would be sore the next day. And of course, my tendons and elbows would be frying. But I don't know, man. I think Todd works at that level too.
Yeah, and that's a great way you frame it too for practice. Where when you're going against a bigger, stronger guy, and you just say, "Let me hang with you for a while. Let me wear you out a little bit. 10 seconds is plenty to wear on you, and then you try to finish from my strong point." Makes a big difference. It helps both. It helps both people. You're helping the stronger guy by forcing him to hold, and then he has to work through you. And by then, who knows what happens? Like,
I'm also a tough guy to practice pull because I have like a 13-inch long forearm. My upper arm is average.
Hard to pin.
Well, hard to pin, yes, but if I'm able to drive, you're left or right dominant? I don't know. You're right.
I'm left-handed, but my right's stronger.
Okay. So if we start in a regular hook, you beat me. If you let me to get a full deep cup and get my shoulder behind it and get kind of like start a little bit and you're a little bit open, I'm a little bit closed, and I have you not pronate but try to go through me, you probably won't be able to easily. You're going to have to start forcing. And if I say, well, don't start forcing for 5 seconds so I can bring your gas tank down a little bit lower, and now you're hampered by maybe 10%, now we're in a war. Even though you're stronger than me, now we're in a training war where the guts are going to win. And that's an amazing thing. It's a way to handicap the stronger guy, assuming the stronger guy can leave his ego at the door and know that he might have a, you know, the optics don't look good if you and I get into a long hook war and you're 70 pounds heavier than me. People looking, but who gives a fuck? The smaller, weaker guy can make the bigger guy work if they're smart, and I mean work.
Oh yeah.
But you have to stay in that hook. You can't start popping. You can't start kings moving, all that clowning bullshit. But if you stay in, I can make almost anyone work. I used to do that with Ian Carnegie. He was a legit like 350 pounds.
Yeah, the Grippler's still legit. It's a strong
Yeah,
dude.
he's awesome. Yeah, a great guy. And I used to be able to do that with him, but he would have to, towards the end of the practice, and I would have to, it'd be like 12, 13 seconds before he could even start to move. Like he would force to absorb me, but I'd be redlining for 12 seconds and I could redline for 25. And then when he starts to go through me, now it's like, oh shit, it's not easy to go through him anymore. I'm fully set and tucked. And because I have such a short forearm, it's not easy for a longer arm to get through a shorter arm when he's tucked. It's hard for the short arm to establish position, but once that short forearm is established, it's hard to get him out.
Oh yeah, I've realized that many times over from practicing with guys. There's Eli Ekstrom and Jared Ekstrom. They're two guys who practice with us. Eli's a top roller. Jared's an inside hook press guy. They're both about 135 pounds. But if you let Jared set his hook deep, his short fucking forearm does not want to open. It's tough to pry that short forearm open. It's a real deal for sure. And it's a great way to train. There's no point in ego training at practice. You're not winning any money. You're not increasing your ranking or clout. You're just practicing with your friends and teammates to make each other better. If I'm working harder and he's working harder, we're both winning. And that should be your goal at practice should be for everybody to get better. Because if they're not getting better, you're not getting better. So that's the main goal of practice. Help make everyone better. There was one more match from East vs. West I wanted to talk about. It was the only women's match on the card. It was Elizabeth Mochek versus Alexandra something Russian. And I picked this. This was the only match I think that I picked wrong. I had Alexandra beating Mochek, but I assumed Alexandra was pulling a woman. You may have been right, Chris. She came out fucking fully 5 o'clock shadow, jacked out. and she destroyed her 3 rounds to 0. I say that in jest. I don't think Mochek's a man, but she looked super manly. She sounded super manly. She smashed Alexandra just from pure power. The match was the match was okay, and I say all these things as about Mochek as like they're true, but they're also funny. How she looks like a man, she sounds like a man. The only time I've ever been annoyed with her was watching her talk to the refs during every round. There's a way to talk to the refs and coach the refs and negotiate with the refs, like how you catch more bees with honey than vinegar. She was doing it from a complete bitching, constantly bitching, rolling her eyes, making faces at the refs. That's never really going to work for you if you're trying to get what you want. And that's something she'll have to work on in the future. She didn't need it in this match because she was just raw diesel power stronger. But what do you think, Chris?
Well, there's two narratives here. The first narrative is I'm right and that she's a dude. I don't think I am right because I've talked to enough people that I respect their opinions and their intelligence and they tell me I'm wrong. So I believe I'm probably wrong. But the second narrative kind of supports my, I guess, judgment or criticism. The second narrative is if you're a female going into a sport that will yield no money and you decide to take so many PEDs that you will look like a man, sound like a man, just to win trophies, you have to deal with the criticism. You have to deal with a lot of backlash. If I decided I'm going to start training for a fitness pageant and I tuck my dong and I take estrogen and I take testosterone suppressors and I do this and I do that, and you could tell I'm a guy, but I'm really working hard to be a woman. Like there would be a lot of flack. Like she obviously is driven. She obviously has incredible work ethic. She obviously has a tremendous amount of focus in the gym, determination to be a champion. So that's the positive. And I'm not getting negative feedback from her. I'm getting from female supporters saying, "Oh, you're bullying." It's an opinion, and what she's doing to her body is her right. But it's also our right to criticize and judge. Not judging her as a human being, but like if you want to take that many PEDs and alter the way you look and sound, I mean, it's all good if the arm wrestling community accepts you, which they do, but you're gonna take some heat. That's the way the world is that we live in. You will take heat, and I don't know if it bothers her that much, but it's her supporters. But that being said, the more I see of her arm wrestling, it's obviously she's driven and she has a coach and she's taking it as serious, even more serious than most male athletes. Like she's all in. So I realize probably she's not a man, although I still, if it comes out she's a dude, I'm not going to be shocked. But enough people that respect your wife, for example, giving me concrete evidence and tangible facts that she's in fact a woman, is enough for me to believe that okay, maybe she's a woman. And I respect all of her strong traits. Yes, she's beating women because she's jacked and on PEDs and closer to a man and biologically than any other woman around. She also has a tremendous amount of drive and work ethic. So I'll give her big credit on that. But like I said, those are the two.
Yeah, nobody's questioning her drive and work ethic. Like when I say these things about Mochek, I'm not knocking. You could give any woman all the PEDs she's taking. If they don't work out and have the dedication she does to the sport, they're not going to reach where she's at. She's reached where she's at because of her drive and dedication, and the PEDs clearly have helped like exhilarate her progress to the next level. But I'm glad we've established that she's a woman, because I've been going back and forth on this for a few weeks. We had talked before we even started this podcast. We had talked about starting the top 10 ugliest women in arm wrestling. We had joked around with it back and forth. And I'm just wondering, like, do we even still do that? Do we do a top 10 ugliest women in arm wrestling, or is that just too mean to do?
Well, here's the problem with doing that list is that it's malicious in nature. And if you're ugly, most ugly people know they're ugly and they have a complex about it and they can't do anything about it. So I have a problem with whenever I troll or criticize or test anyone, it's all based on qualities that they can change. Me picking on someone that's fat, I'm big on fat shaming. Guess what? If it bothers you, you can lose weight. If you're a complete asshole, guess what? You can be less of an asshole. But criticizing an ugly person when they really can't do anything about it is not only malicious, which isn't. I'm not all against being malice or being malicious, but nothing good can come out of that. And you can gain traction in comments and all that shit. But I think if we did a top 10 most attractive women, or even the top 10 women that we perceive are best in bed, we would get as much, good. That's an interesting list. We got to figure out who would be good in bed. Although you'd have some interesting discussions with your wife after the fact. But I mean, these are positive things that will give a lot of traction and laughter and comments, and it will get as much traction. You'll probably get more traction because when you take 50 women and you put them in a room and you say, I'm going to take the top 10 and put them in the corner, and those top 10, I'm going to list 1 to 10 in terms of attractiveness. There's going to be a lot of unhappy women in that room, and the one that was listed 9 is not going to be too happy. And so you're going to get a lot of angst, and you're going to get a lot of people not very happy with, even when you're creating a most beautiful or hottest list. But the ugliest list, I mean, ugliest people in terms of personality, that's one thing, because they can change that. But making a list of the most physically ugly people, it's almost like making a list of the 10 arm wrestlers with the lowest IQ, because they can't do anything about it. You can't do anything about it.
I don't know. I feel like we could do the 10 lowest IQs, and that would probably be good, because they're all going to be men, and they're going to be too dumb to respond, and they're going to be too dumb to the 10 dumbest IQ is brilliant. You might be onto something there, but the 10 ugliest women, to me, it feels like being mean for the sake of being mean,
and it comes off, and it makes our podcast become like we're authentic. We call it as it is, and but that is shock value for the sake of shock value, and I'm not big on that. Every time I troll, every time I criticize, there's always even though it's not apparent, there's always a reason for it that for me makes sense, and people can. It's a learning, growing opportunity. But the top 10 ugliest is just mean, and it's just malicious, and you can't. Nothing good can come out of it. Nothing good except laughter, but not. It's like not good laughter. It's only berating people that can't change anything. It's really not. It's not someone I want to be. It's not a thing, a list I want to make, because nothing comes out of it. Nothing good can come of it.
No, I agree with that completely. And I think in this day and age, a lot of people talk about like sexism, racism, transphobia. There's no one on planet Earth, regardless of your country, your race, your gender identity. If you're ugly, your path in life is much harder than someone who's pretty as a woman. An ugly woman is always going to have a harder time in life than a beautiful woman. And it doesn't even like the beautiful, pretty woman could be a box of rocks. She's going to get better opportunities than someone who is ugly and has an average IQ. And I don't see the point in being mean to anybody just for the sake of being mean, especially when it comes to women, with like bullying or being mean to women just for the sake of doing it. Like, you could clearly make the list. There's clearly a list. And
I have a list. I've made a list. I have that list. I have a list. The question is, do I air the list? And I won't air the list. I've made that list. I have enough free time where I've made a top 10 of every conceivable variable trait you can think of. But no, it just like when you do the top 10 most beautiful, most attractive, you're going to get a lot more comments and people saying, putting in their 2 cents, saying, "Well, I think number 7 should be 2. Well, I think I have a fondness for number 4. I think she should be number 1." And you'll have a lot of interesting conversations and back and forth. But when you make the top 10 ugliest list, you're not going to have people like anyone that comes in and says, "Oh, that's a good list, but I would have 4 or 10." Like you're not going to get good people chiming in. You're going to get shitty human beings trying to chime in on a shitty list. It's just not a good place. It's not a good thing.
No,
Uh,
no, for sure. And I thought the top 10 best in bed you brought up was hilarious because Mochek might skyrocket. She might put you down and fucking Amazon position you till you're dehydrated.
yeah,
She might make you suck that clit till you're just foaming from the mouth.
yeah. She can be a very. I can see her being very overpowering in bed. Um, you know, takes care of the body, tan, aggressive, hostile.
She might
Yeah,
she might lay it down on you, Chris. You're gonna
Yeah.
get what you asked for.
Yeah. Of course, she's got so much chest, she probably can't get wet. So that's not a good thing.
Just get a hawk two on that thing, like I said before, man.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, she would definitely. I'd have to put her in the top 3 because just of veracity and sheer drive and aggression, right? Like she'd have to be on that.
She might be the only woman under 200 pounds that could rape you, Chris.
Yeah. Although it's interesting when you make that list.
Spartacus Project Podcast.